India is a big hub for science and innovation. Indian scientists publish a lot of scientific material. Most recently, we saw the episode where a publication in the Lancet, the highly regarded Lancet, was retracted, and some of the effort for that retraction came from India. But it also showed that a paper published in the Indian Journal of Medical Research, the IJMR, the highly regarded Indian journal, probably withstood the transparency compared to what happened at Lancet. So this raises a big question. Should Indians publish more in Indian journals? And should Indian journals get equal weightage in the promotion of scientists? I have with me Dr. Shekhar Mande. He is the Director General of the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research and one of those researchers who wrote a long message to the World Health Organization and to the Lancet criticizing this paper in Lancet on hydrochloroquine and the clinical trial around it. Dr. Mande, is it time that Indian scientists publish more in Indian journals and not look and ape for publishing in foreign journals?
So that's a very relevant question to ask. We can't dictate to scientists where they should publish their findings or not. It's a prerogative of a scientist. It's obvious that any working scientist would like to have as wider an audience about his or her work as possible. So a scientist always chooses a journal in which his or her work gets a better audience across the world. And the better audience typically gets by journals which follow better practices, right? When the paper is published to a journal, whether the review is done religiously correctly, or whether the peer review is correct or not, or things like that. And typically, therefore, people would choose journals which are as such which have better ethical practices and better manuscript handling practices. Also, there's another issue that many of us try to publish in journals which are very difficult to publish in. So the journals which have very high rejection rate are the ones that we actually try to publish them in, because we know that naturally those are journals which are actually read better by other people, and that's essentially what it is. So we don't actually really, but it doesn't matter whether the journal is a foreign journal or Indian journal. But the point that you are making is actually a good point, that we should attempt to make Indian journals to the same quality so that our own people would be able to submit to our own journals.
See, this also falls in line with what Prime Minister Narendra Modi has asked for Atma Nirbharta or self-reliance. If we are talking of self-reliance in many other areas, why not self-reliance in publishing our scientific work, which is Indian scientific work, in Indian journals? Today, the world is online, so readership can be equally if a journal is published in India or wherever. All depends, and CSIR is a very big hub for some of the finest journals in India. So do you think in this Atmanirbharta effort there should be more emphasis on Indian publishing and Indian journals? I agree that scientists need to publish where they feel like, but there should there be now a negative factor towards publishing in foreign and looking at more Indian?
So that spirit is actually very well appreciated, that we should bring our journals to a level where our own scientists would be encouraged to publish in Indian journals. And that would actually be a very well taken thing in the Atmanirbharta, as what you have correctly pointed out. As it so happens, this morning I had a discussion on this precise issue with some of the leaders in CSIR on how do we make our journals attractive for our scientists to do that. And we have a definite plan now that is emerging on how do we make our journals world class, so that people from all over the world, and of course people from India, feel encouraged to publish in these journals.
But see, this increasingly, whenever promotions are made in scientific circles, whether you had a PhD in Harvard or a PhD in Stanford. You're a PhD from the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, which is one of our finest institutions. Uh, should that be now a motivating factor for pushing people to do more Indian work? Science is global, but there is now talk of being vocal for local.
It's obvious that some aspect of science should also address the local needs. Science, of course, as you said, is global. Science arises out of natural curiosity of our mind about the queries about nature and why things are like what they are. But some aspect of science, if it's addressed towards the burning issues that the society faces, that also is will be very useful. And therefore your point is quite well taken.
What is the lesson you learned? Because you stood out in criticizing this paper in the Lancet, which questioned the use of hydrochloroquine. So, what is the lesson India needs to learn, and what is the lesson which Dr. Shekhar Mande has learned from this single episode, where within a few weeks you had a retraction both from Lancet and in New England Journal of Medicine?
Okay, to be fair, the New England Journal of Medicine, we did not take up the matter with them. We took up the matter with the Lancet. But I must also add that I was very ably assisted by two very distinguished colleagues, Dr. Anurag Agarwal, who himself is a pulmonary medicine person, but also the director of Institute of Genomics and Integrative Biology, and Professor Rajiv Karandikar, a very well-known theory of probability person in the country or globally. He understands statistics extraordinarily well. So three of us, when we put our head together, it was obvious to us within an hour of reading the paper on the 23rd or 24th May that the conclusions drawn in the paper were not commensurate what was being presented there. And therefore, and there were very serious statistical issues. And that's when we decided to write to the editor of Lancet and to the WHO that the reaction of WHO in stopping the trials was not correct, and Lancet had probably made an error of judgment in publishing that paper because it would not withstand the test of time as far as the science of the paper is concerned. Now, the only lesson that we learn from here is a peer review system, as long as it is strong, which actually Lancet has proven it is strong, because when there is a lot of noise being made around the world, they had it reviewed once again and they have retracted the paper. In fact, the authors themselves have retracted the paper. So to have a very strong peer review system hardwired, so that even if there are editorial or journal errors that come in, creep in, they should be addressed very quickly. And Lancet actually did that pretty well. So these things actually they did correct it, managed to correct it within a very short time. And if we were to promote our Indian journals in the same spirit, we should hardware these kind of practices in our own Indian journal review peer review system.
Uh, Simultaneously, the same day when WHO paused the trial, there's a paper which came out from the Indian Journal of Medical Research and the ICMR, with so much spine in them, withstood and said that we will continue using hydrochloroquine for our frontline workers. Again, what does it show, and what is the lesson you can draw from that particular episode, which is an Indian journal and an Indian institution and an Indian heading that and standing out?
So that's a very nice study indeed. I have written a paper myself on hydroxychloroquine and high risk contacts of healthcare workers and all who are high risk contact to contact COVID-19. And if they take hydroxychloroquine, whether they are protected or they are not protected. So essentially, it's a prophylactic kind of use of hydroxychloroquine. And the paper and study is very well done. We don't find any problem with the design aspect of the study as well as the conclusion aspect of the study. And because it is published in Indian Journal of Medical Research, we are even more proud that work of this quality has been published in the Indian Journal.
See, these days there's open source publishing, and a lot of people are spending a lot of money in paying journals. I'm not talking of the predatory journals, but even journals in the nature stable are charging money for publishing. Now, if you promote your journals in India, current science, the journals from the CSIR, NISCARE stable, couldn't India be saving a lot of money?
Obviously, it will. So the two models which have emerged in the world is whether reader pays for the journal, that is, the journal does not charge authors any fees, and if you want to read that journal, you'll have to subscribe it to your library, and you can with the proper appropriate copyrights and all, you can actually use that particular article for your own research or for the purposes. The second model is author pays model, in which authors pay the journal to publish their own work in that particular journal, and it is generally understood that in the author pays model, the journal is freely accessible to all the people around the world. But the author pay model actually charges authors pretty heavily. And what you are seeing is very well taken point, that if we have a hybrid of the two models in India, it will actually save a lot of money to Indian researchers and also to Indian readers if we make all these journals open access. And that's precisely the point that we discussed a while ago. As I said, we had a very high level committee meeting in CSIR. We discussed both these models, and we tend to believe that we should keep the journals open access and the author fees to bare minimum low, so that we can sustain the journals in their quality.
So can we hope for Atma Nirbharta in scientific publishing?
Certainly, with the best wishes from all of you and a scientific fraternity from India and around the globe, we do hope to have Atma Nirbharta in scientific publishing in India.
Always such a pleasure speaking to you, Shekhar. Always a delight. Your vision and your thoughts mean a lot for the country. And I hope you can bring in more Atma Nirbharta in scientific publishing and respect for Indian scientists who publish in Indian journals, because that is the only way you can increase the value of Indian journals.